Welcome back, everybody, to the Shooting Gallery New England. We appreciate you swinging by, and we're happy to come at you this week with another how-to video on how to run a single action revolver. Now, this might not be the most typical type of firearm that many new gun owners are used to, but since last week we did a double action revolver, and this week I want to make sure we go over at least another firearm action, and this is a single action Heritage Rough Rider. It is in 22 long rifle. So we're going to get down to the tabletop. We're going to show you some of the safety features of these firearms and how to safely work a single action revolver, okay? Today we're going after the single action revolver. These are considered the cowboy guns, and there is a huge following. Again, I have to state this, I am not the biggest fan of revolvers, but for some reason this single action revolver is probably one of my favorite guns to shoot on occasion, because it's so simple, but I feel like I'm in Red Dead Redemption. It's a 22 LR. This is a Heritage Arms Rough Rider. These are stupid inexpensive. They're like, you can get them on sale for like $125. I bought this for $175. This is a blued. I'm gonna go with a 5.5-inch barrel. Again, specs aren't the biggest thing for me when I'm just getting into guns. So now today you're gonna learn that a single action revolver, obviously it's a single action, where it's a single pull of the trigger pull and you are ready to go. This does have an actual external safety that we're going to go over, but there's a few things you want to obviously remember. First and foremost, make sure that you treat every firearm as if it is unloaded. Treat every firearm as if it is loaded. Make sure you treat it as it's loaded. Never assume it's unloaded, guys. That was my mistake. Number two, always point the firearm in a safe direction. And also, number three, do not point the firearm at anything you do not intend to destroy. Obviously, there are tons of other safety features, but today we're just making sure we go over those big three, okay? So, now, with single action revolvers, they're a little bit more, not complex, but there's a few more things you gotta know when you're just going to load them. So we're gonna at least go over how to load and unload first, then we're gonna go over some safety features. When you're considering a single action revolver, you have to realize there's a special way to load it and double check that it is loaded. So obviously, depending on the model, always check your manual to see if it does have a safety. If it doesn't, this does have a transfer bar safety, so this means it's off. The safety's off. This means the safety is on. When the red dot is covered up, the firearm is safe to use. Now, again, every single action revolver is different. I do recommend reading a manual or looking up online or asking the store clerk how to use the firearm. God forbid you do need to use it. So with this one, it's a 4-click hammer. So we're gonna do one. That's kind of, you know, it disengages the trigger. You can't really do anything with it. Second click, you're able to move the cylinder. I do not recommend take it and just automatically going and just hot dogging it and kind of not putting excess wear and tear, but still you want to kind of treat it with some delicacy because it is a revolver. So if a revolver does decide to fail, you're kind of going up the hill if you really want to get technical about it. So I do recommend that you do handle with care. So the second click frees up the cylinder. Third click, you're pretty much already there. You could release the trigger, but pull it all the way back to the fourth click. It's ready to go. You don't have to worry about anything. I can kind of dry fire this because there is a transfer bar, so it's not going to harm the firearm, and there is no firing pin that is permanently on the hammer. Always double check with the firearm that you have to make sure, because if you do have a firing pin on the hammer, do not dry fire unless you are using snap caps. Just like we saw in last week's video with a double action revolver which had the firing pin on the hammer. Just be careful of that. Now, you're gonna open the loading gate and we're gonna pull it down to the second position. 1, 2. Frees up the cylinder. Now, kind of same way of loading it is, I'm gonna make sure I can show it. This is kind of the way I like to hold it. Now, it's gonna go clockwise on this one. So we're gonna take a snap cap, make sure the loading gate is open, which is right here. Now we're gonna line it up, pop it in. Now hold it kind of like you're holding a cell phone. Think of it like that. Wrap all 4 fingers around it where the thumb can work the cylinder. Pop that in again. And this is a 6-shot. Most of them are going to be 6 shots. Some of them might be 8 shot. I know with Heritage, you're able to buy a 9-shot 22 and 9-shot 22 Magnum cylinder for these. But for this instance, this is just a 6-shot revolver. Now, when the cylinder is fully loaded, close the loading gate and safely lower the hammer. So technically, this is ready to go. They are using snap caps. Let's get that out of the way. Now, same thing of holding and pointing to use the revolver safely, just like a double action revolver. There's a way to shoot it. There's going to be higher pressure cartridges. Sometimes you might get black powder. Don't buy a black powder revolver for your first handgun. I don't recommend that. There's a lot more that goes into it. So we're going to grip it just like a double action. Make sure our index finger does not go past the front of the cylinder. You have full control over this firearm. Now, so say you go, and we're going to go into some safety features and how-tos later on in the video, but now when you, again, you can teacup it like I showed you in the last video, where you take your support hand and kind of act like it's like a teacup and wrap it around like that. You still have full mobility of the hammer. Or you can have this way where you kind of line your thumbs up, make sure your index finger does not pass the front of the cylinder, and that's still, you have mobility of the hammer, the trigger, the safety, everything. This is more the proper way to do it, but if you're a new shooter just trying to get the fundamentals down, again, I do recommend the teacup method. Now, to unload the firearm, say you go bam, 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 bam. Alright, cylinder is empty. This is a 22 Magnum, so, I mean a 22 LR. You pull the hammer back to the second position so it frees up the cylinder. Now in every single action revolver, you have a ejection rod right here. I am pointing this in a safer direction. I know it seems like I'm pointing it at me, but I'm kind of sitting diagonal. So for you safety Nazis out there, I'm not pointing the gun directly at me, and there's snap caps in here. Just getting that out of the way. So, take the ejection rod, and just to demonstrate it, you can pull the ejection rod, make sure the loading gate is open. So we're going to push the ejection rod, and then essentially, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's so many different types of safety features that you got to worry about too when it comes to single action revolvers. Obviously, when you pull the hammer all the way back, the firearm is ready to go. So, obviously, control your finger, make sure that your trigger finger is, you know, under control. You're not you don't have the firearm loaded. Obviously use snap caps if you're handling the firearm for cleaning or demonstration purposes. Now, one thing I do want to make everybody aware of: when you pull the firearm back, obviously if you do have a firing pin on the hammer and you don't have a transfer bar, you can essentially, if you bump it, it's gonna go forward. Now, what isn't the case, especially with these Heritage firearms, it's going to be a little bit different, but some of them, some single action revolvers, you are able to do it. I don't recommend doing this where you've seen in like The Mummy where the guy takes the hammer and just... Okay, don't do that. You're going to ruin the springs. You can hurt yourself because some spurs on the hammer are actually very sharp. You can actually start bleeding. I don't recommend doing that. It's unsafe. It's kind of one thing that the media thinks everyone with single action revolvers can do. I don't recommend doing it, so just be safe with that. Obviously, if you have a safety, understand how it works. The higher you go in caliber, like if you go like a 45 Colt, there are 357, 38s, there's 32 auto, there is 44 Magnum, some you know, higher calibers all the way up to 500 line ball, which I have never had any experience with, but from what I've read, it's probably one of the most powerful handgun cartridges there is. So obviously, you know, there are some things you want to consider too. Is always check, you know, like when I first got this, depending on obviously the quality of your single action revolver, is when you're gonna realize, okay, some things are worth this much money, or this is why it's worth $125. What I had to do is when I first bought this was the screw. I don't know if this is for everybody's heritage Rough Rider, but the screw that holds your ejection rod and kind of like the housing, that would potentially, you know, back out sometimes. So what I had to do is I had to put Loctite on that, because you don't want to be firing this, even if you buy this in like a 38, that's a lot more recoil going down, so obviously the screw is going to back out. So I had to put Loctite on the screw and screw it down. Never had a problem since. Obviously cleaning it, you want to make sure, depending on the ammo you use with rim fires, it's going to get a lot dirtier. Make sure you check the bore of all extrusions and stuff like that. Make sure not the bore of the firearm isn't getting lead caked in all around it. Just some safety features to go over. But single action revolvers are probably the most simplest firearm to use, because all you do is pull the hammer back. As long as the safety's off, it's ready to go. You know, they're very highly accurate, and I do recommend them for like training purposes. Self-defense, I'm not the biggest fan of, but you know, if that's all you can have, it's better than a sharp stick. I do want to go over some of the terminology of a single action revolver. Obviously this is going to be your front strap, your back strap, grips, trigger guard, housing. Now this is your loading gate. This is pretty much the door to get into the cylinder. This is the cylinder, just like the double action revolver. You're gonna have a cylinder that holds the rounds, like your magazine. This is, for this model, is the safety. Down is unsafe, up is safe. You have your hammer, the jimping and stuff on the back here. That is your hammer spur that allows you to grip the hammer. This is the housing for the ejection rod. You have your ejection rod. This does again have a fixed sight. Most revolvers, especially single action revolvers, are going to have a fixed bladed sight. You can add some white paint on there to get more sight acquisition. You're going to have a groove on the top of the firearm to act as your rear sight. There is, you know, the takedown button, where all you have to do is push this button right here. Make sure that it's in focus. Alright, you push this button right here, it allows you to go through, pull this little pin out, and that releases the cylinder. They do make some great aftermarket accessories for single action revolvers. You can get gunsmiths that are able to really work on the trigger. It's already a light trigger pull, which again, I wouldn't recommend working on a single action trigger just because it's already very light, unless you're doing like cowboy action shooting and you need that really feathered trigger. You can get aftermarket grips. Most guys get like that imitation ivory, or some, if you're really cool, you want to get actual ivory grips. I don't really see the point of it, but if you're trying to like flex your status, get ivory grips. I'd like to see, like, I know there's a company either on Etsy or Instagram, I forget what they're called. I want to say it's MD Grips. A guy somewhere in the like Midwest, he's able to make like elk, deer, moose, like the antlers, and he makes revolver grips and 1911 grips out of them, and they're like elk grips. I think that's just cool because I just geek out over stuff like that. Eventually I would like to pick up a set for my double action and maybe my 1911. Heritage, as they stand, makes aftermarket grips for these. So if you're looking for aftermarket support, there's not a ton for single action, but again, gunsmithing is going to be required for like if you want to work on the trigger by honing the inside. I'm not going to break the inside down just because this is just a general overview and like how to work them. I'm going to have a video coming out soon on how to fully take down and clean and lubricate a single action revolver. That's going to be a really awesome video. I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's going to be coming out soon. But that's pretty much it, guys. Single action revolvers are fun, great trainers. They're accurate as hell depending on the caliber. This is a 22. I just love it because it's cheap to shoot. They're inexpensive to own. You can get into them for not a lot of money. Ammunition is dirt cheap if you get a 22, even 22 Magnum. So we're gonna get back up top again, guys. Don't forget about our 250 subscriber giveaway that we're having soon. Let's get this channel to 250 subscribers, and you're gonna get, if you're the lucky winner, you're gonna grab a Victory trigger from Tandem Cross for your Ruger Mark IV. So let's get back up top, guys. Thank you again for tuning. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of How To when it comes to how to work a single action revolver. Makes me feel like a real cowboy. Single action revolvers are really fun, especially when you're trying to learn how to shoot. It helps you learn how to, get your breathing under control and proper sight alignment and stuff like that, especially with a 22 just like this. These are stupid affordable. I hope you enjoyed this week. Again, don't forget, guys, we are having a 250 subscriber giveaway. The link to that video is going to be in the description below. We'll see you next time, everybody. Have a good one.